So over lunch, you talked to me about how World War II was the time when a lot of local ordinances were passed about gender-appropriate dress, including whether the buttons go one way or the other way.
Right.
I was wondering if you could explain that to our audience.
Well, of course, the United States has a history of becoming consumed with the idea of sexual disorder during war. That was true in World War I, when government agents would try to keep both alcohol and women out of military camps. And it's particularly true in World War II, which was, as we know, a mass mobilization of men and women, bringing large numbers of women not just into the military and into clerical services at military bases, but also bringing women into factories. And those women were being well paid, and often those women were utterly and completely unattended by men. And that became something that the military and cities like Los Angeles, New York, Detroit, worried about that there would be this sort of large group of sexually disorderly women. And there were two things they were worried about. Of course, one is that families would completely fall apart. And we see, you know, later during the Cold War that there's this tremendous backlash of putting families back together again, putting men back in charge. But the other thing they're concerned about, of course, is the spread of venereal disease to troops. And they're concerned about the rise of prostitution, that ordinary women will become prostitutes. So you see a whole series of new laws being made, some of which are being made by military order during World War II. One of them is women not being able to allow to sit in a bar unaccompanied by a man. Okay, that any woman unaccompanied was automatically assumed to be a prostitute. And there are long-term effects of this. I mean, there are lawsuits by feminists in the 1970s overturning these laws about women not being allowed to get a hotel room on their own, not being allowed to go to a bar on their own, and so on. But the other thing we see is laws about women's clothing, because women going into the factories are dressing like men. They're wearing jeans, they're wearing men's shirts, they're wearing men's boots. And on the one hand, this is a practical thing. And on the other hand, this becomes very worrisome to authorities that not only are women going to start dressing like men, but they're going to start acting like men. So one of the things you begin to see is the passage of laws about how many women's garments a woman has to wear in order to be legally dressed. And these laws, of course, after World War II are used against lesbians. It becomes a reason to pick up a lesbian on the street who is seen to be mannishly dressed, and she'll be taken down to the station and forced to undress to prove that she's wearing 3 articles of women's clothing. All right, and 3 somehow becomes the magic number in places like New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles. So then the question becomes, how do you distinguish between men's and women's clothing, particularly from the 50s onwards, in which women are entering a business environment and beginning to wear clothes that are more similar to men's. They're tailored to women, but they're more similar to men's than they are different from men's. And so what designers come up with is the idea of putting the buttons on different sides for different genders. All right, so that the buttons will go, and I can never remember which side is which, but I think the buttons go on the left for men and they go on the right for women. Okay, yes, everybody's going to look at their shirts now and see if they can figure out. But not only for that, the question of pants, okay? Does your zipper fly go to the right or does it go to the left? Okay, it's a very long time before designers are willing to put zipper flies on the front for women. All right, for several decades, starting in World War II, which is really the moment in which it becomes at all respectable for women to wear pants. And they're not really called pants, they're called slacks. For several decades, the zipper has to go on the side. All right, so you know whether it's a men's garment or a women's garment depending on where the zippers and the buttons are placed. What's also interesting about it is to look at how butch lesbians begin to sort of adapt to and resist to these things. So that, for example, they will look for shirts that they can switch the buttons on, or they will move a zipper from one place to another so that they can say, well, this is a woman's pants because of X, Y, or Z, even though the zipper is on the front, which they want for a more masculine and flat-fronted look. But what you'll also see in the oral histories of butch lesbians is the great care that people went to, what would those 3 garments be? And where would they be put? And how could they put them on in such a way that they would be invisible to other butches and to femmes, but that they would still not risk being arrested on the street for wearing clothes of the wrong gender?